say, which is, we wanted someone younger leading this fight because it's probably going to affect younger people the most. And Tyler's done a fantastic job, and he's going to explain to you some of the things that are going on.
Thank you, Kim. My name's Tyler Link. I'm excited and honored to kind of be the chair of it, but I'd really like to introduce all the other trustees. So there's 11 of us total. We just had a new election for active members. So currently, we have Tom Huguenet, he's a sergeant over in Baker Sector. Sergeant Scott Askew, just told you he's over in SIU. Sergeant Mike Cowden, he's down at the South Sub, Division Detective. Corporal Nick Moore, who is Henry 880. So along with these 5 active guys are 2 retirees that we're excited to have. Carl Zimmerman, been on board for a couple of years, and Keith Harrison, who is the vice chair. Along with them, we still have 4 other people who are from the city. 1 civilian, he's been on our board since probably before I was even alive, I think like 30-some years now. And 3 people from the city. Ed Mandino was just put on, he's the deputy city CFO. Melinda Weaver, who's the city treasurer, and a council member who's Kathy Togo. So as we move forward in this process, those are the 11 people that are on the board and that are going to be kind of running with us throughout this. So our current situation, I know everybody knows this, but we currently have a $580 million unfunded liability. Essentially what that means is we're about 58% funded, and we have an infinite number of years for an infinite time period for us to amortize that, which essentially means we're going to have to make a change. From where we're at right now, it's just not sustainable. The way that pensions simply work, it's just a math equation. Benefits equal our contributions plus our investments, and everything's not adding up right now. Is that better? All right. So we know that we're going to have to make a change. We know that we're either going to have to put more money in or take less money out. And that's as simple as it is. Whether we want to contribute more along with the city, that money can come from either employer, employee, or any combination of both. Or if we don't, then on the flip side of that equation, we know that our benefits are going to have to change. So to kick things off, we recently met with city staff, myself, and I'm so sorry, I forgot to introduce our executive director, Patty Featherston. She's been with us for 4 years now. Brings us a lot of experience, was over at APRS, and she's done a lot of great things for us so far. So we met with city staff. They put together a team, which is actually led by Ed Mandino. Has a number of different people from kind of all around the city helping out with them. And they indicated a few things that I wanted to pass along as we move forward and kind of be transparent. Number one, they've already been through this. With COERS, the City of Austin Employees Retirement System, they tiered it back in 2012. And so their retirement system prior to 2012, you could work for the city for 25 years and have a 3.0 multiplier. And then in 2012, what they did is all new hires who were hired after that accrued at a 2.5 multiplier at 30 years. But they kept all current employees who were hired prior to that under that Plan A, that first system. So they continue to accrue at that 3.0 multiplier. And they essentially indicated that they want to do the same thing for us, and that's their belief. I believe that too. They took the stance of if you're hired under this, I'm going to use little fingers here, but promise benefit, that we owe it to try to keep that to us for current members. With that said, probably going to result in new hires falling under a second plan. If you look at every other major city in Texas, most of them have already been tiered. Houston has a 2.25 multiplier. Dallas and Fort Worth both have a 2.5 multiplier. El Paso has a 2.5 multiplier. San Antonio kind of has a funky one, but essentially you work 27 years to get an 80% rate of your salary, whereas we only work 25 years, so they work an extra 2 years. So when you look at us compared to everybody else, our 3.2 multiplier is an obvious outlier. And I recognize that, I'm sure everybody in this room recognizes that. So when we start looking at how we're going to fix our system, step one would probably be to implement a new tier for new hires. With that said, that's not going to move the needle as much as we think it will for solving for how we're going to get under 30 years for unfunded liability. It's going to help a little bit, but it's completely not going to do it on its own. So what the city indicated is they'd be willing to put in more money to our system along with us to try to keep benefits as close as possible to what we have now. So by implementing a new tier, if that's the direction we board take, I'm going to preface that, but by looking at a new tier for new hires, we would then solve for the amount of money needed and percentage increase to try to savor our benefits of that 3.2 at a 23-year retirement. So whatever that percentage is, it's been standard practice. The Texas Pension Review Board has always put out that an employer is going to pay 60%, employee is going to pay 40% of contributions, which is what we currently have right now. We would ask the city the same thing. If we need to put in X amount, they put in 60%, we put in 40%. And in terms of putting in more money, it would simply be a vote of the active membership. So it would just fall back to all actives, and they would be the ones to decide whether we want to contribute more or not. So I'm hoping to get a little guidance from all the actives moving forward. In the next couple of weeks, we're going to put out a survey, probably after our February 19th board meeting, once we know a little harder number on what that percentage increase would be, and just simply ask the membership, do we want to put this in? Do we want to put in an extra, however much it is, 2, 3, 4, 5%? And if the answer is yes, then we try to savor what we have. If the answer is no, then unfortunately the board is going to have to do the heavy lifting and look at other ways to make it sustainable, which is ultimately going to result in lowering a multiplier and or increasing the number of years till we retire. So I've kind of urged everybody and urged supervisors when that survey comes out, make sure we allow everybody to take it. It's going to be very short, sweet, to the point, but we're going to try to get as much feedback as possible, and that's going to help give direction to the board moving forward for what the active membership wants in terms of making it more sustainable. So if you look at a timeline for where we're at now and where we need to go, we know that to increase employer contributions, the city is going to have to vote on that. The city council is going to have to vote on that, and they're going to vote on that probably in September for their October fiscal year, which means we're going to have to vote at the same time. I say we as an active members, probably in that August time range. The city has indicated that they start audit and finance committees as early as April, and they would like to have some sort of package that they can present, or at least guidelines within a package in April. So we're going to know whether the next couple months, various scenarios, how they're going to affect us, and hopefully get some feedback on membership on whether we want to either contribute more money or leave our contribution rate where it's at and change some other factors, the multiplier and the years of service. So we'll kind of go through this. Next couple board meetings, there's going to be a lot of information put out. There's going to be a lot of different scenarios run. All the board members are going to have input on the various scenarios that we run. They will present at the February board meeting 2 tiers. It's going to present just as a guideline for moving forward. Our actuary is going to present a second tier that's going to have new hires at a 25-year retirement with a 2.5 multiplier. The only reason we did that is that's simply what everybody else is at in terms of our competitors. Dallas, Fort Worth, El Paso, and Houston, and San Antonio with theirs. A little bit different the way that they do it, but it's essentially in line with every other major city. The second one that they're going to do is a 25-year with a 2.7 multiplier. And the reason that we came up with that is when we were at a 3.2 and the city was at a 3.0, we always had that kind of 0.2 percentage point advantage over civilian employees. So now that they've tiered theirs down to a 2.5 to kind of savor that first responder police advantage, we're going to try to keep it at a 2.7. At least that's a tier option that will be presented, and it'll help give us a baseline for how much more money is needed after that. And then simply it's going to come out as a survey that we're hoping to get a lot of feedback on. Does anybody have anything to add to that? All right. Well, that's kind of all I've got prepared. Does anybody have any questions? And I'm going to, before anybody asks a question real quick, they are recording this, and I was kind of told to make sure that our questions would, the people who are asking knew they were being recorded. So yes, sir.
I assume I'm being recorded whenever I'm at work. So. Hey, quick question. You referenced major cities that have gone to the tiered system.
Yes, sir.
How do we compare to the amount the individual officers contribute to our system as compared to Houston, San Antonio, Dallas, Fort Worth?
That's a great question. So I'm going to repeat it for the camera. How much do we contribute compared to everybody else? So I just referenced those 2.5 multipliers. What do those other cities contribute? So for us, we currently contribute 13%. Dallas contributes 13.5. El Paso contributes 18%. Fort Worth contributes 13.13. Houston 10.5, and San Antonio 12.32. So I know the old adage used to be we contribute so much more than everybody else, but I think that's kind of been brought down a little bit as everybody else has already gone through this. They've already implemented their tiers, they've already increased their contributions. So when you look at our multiplier compared to them, we're not contributing that much more to kind of justify how we've got this 3.2 compared to 2.5 multiplier. Yes, sir.
What's got us to this point? Is it because we have a 3.2? I've heard different excuses, and maybe there were some bad investments, but it seems like we're in the greatest economy of our lifetime, and I don't know, are we realizing those gains and those benefits due to the, you know, the economy and the stock market? And it seems like it's been on a tear. So I don't know, I've heard there have been bad investments or this and that in the past, and what are we doing? Are we correcting that stuff? Are we looking at all that stuff to try to fix it?
So the question is, how did we get here? From 2017, we were basically under that 40-year amortization. We were at 34.5. For 2018, we're at infinity. How do we get here? Do we have bad investments? Whatever the case may be. I'm not going to speak to previous investments. We do have some investments that have been dragging us down for years. I always get the question about timber, and we bought a lot of timber in 1998, and I was like 9 years old at the time, so I don't really know why we did that, but we still have some. We're actively selling it. In terms of, so every 5 years, you're supposed to conduct an experience study, and that experience study is going to look at all your assumptions that you use moving forward. So every year when we conduct this actuarial evaluation, there's a number of key assumptions you assume. For instance, we assume we're gonna make 7.5% investment return in the market, or we assume our department's gonna grow by 4%. And we had not done an experience study up until last year. So when we did that, it showed that a lot of our assumptions were, out of whack, basically. So we had to lower them to bring them back to where they were. We had assumed that inflation was gonna grow by 3% a year. Over the last 30 years, it's grown by 2.5, so we lowered that. We had assumed we were gonna make 7.7% as an investment return, and we lowered that to 7.25. Payroll growth was a big one. We were at 4%, assuming our department total payroll growth was gonna grow by 4% a year, and we haven't. We've only grown by 3, so we lowered that. And the biggest one was our mortality. We were using a mortality table for the RP 2000 from a number of years ago that hadn't been updated. And so when we updated it, it showed that our retirees are living about 4 years longer. So that factors into, for retirees making, or if all of our retirees are making $45 million, and we factor in they're gonna live 4 years longer, that's a couple $100 million that we added. So that shot us up from being at 34 years to amortize to infinity where we're at. But I feel that our assumptions are now more in line, and moving forward, we're not gonna have this drastic change in our assumptions. We're going to stick with this experience study every 5 years, use that, and try to plug in accurate assumptions. Yes, sir.
Someone asked earlier, I guess I don't want to ask, but do you see any of the changes requiring us to make decisions of the legislature?
So the question was, do any of our changes require us to go to legislation? And I'm just going to touch on all the changes. So if we have an active member increase in contributions, it's a vote of active members. If we have an employer increase, meaning the city is going to contribute more, then it's a vote by city council. If we have any sort of benefit change, such as a multiplier change or a years of service change, then that's going to be a board decision. Now with that, our statute is kind of written in a way that it says everything you do has to affect the past, the present, and the future. So if we wanted to lower the multiplier for a second tier, we don't have the ability to do that right now. We would have to go to the legislature. We would have to strike that sentence out, try to craft it as short as possible, but make a change to our bill that would allow us to have a second tier, or would allow us to have varying multipliers or varying years of service, whatever the case may be. So I probably can't see us not going to the legislature next year unless we all wanted to contribute amount of money, which I don't think is going to be feasible. Yes, sir.
I understand correctly that after, if it stays above a certain threshold for a number of years, that the state will take over. Is that in fact the case? And when does that clock start?
Yes, sir. So the state requires you to be under 40 years for the number of years to amortize. So this last year when we went to infinity, that was the first year. After 3 consecutive years of being over 40, then the state requires you to adopt a restoration plan, which essentially means you need to fix this or we will. Last year was the first year. In July, we'll get our second year of our actuarial evaluation. That's gonna have the same thing because we haven't implemented changes. And then that third year, which would be summer of 2021, we would have to adopt a restoration plan. So I'm pretty confident we can get a deal done with the city from now up until, the end of the summer, that October timeframe. If by chance, just out of a blue moon, it's not gonna happen, then next summer of 2021, the state would require us to make a change to our system, which is similar to what happened in Dallas. The state essentially came in and said, cops are getting a 2.5 multiplier and the city's gonna pay in the rest.
I got a question. I heard that the city is responsible for paying all sworn positions, putting in their contribution amounts, but they haven't been doing that. And so that 180 officers times their multiplier has not been put into our fund for a very long time. Is that true, or where do we stand with that in the city?
So it's true. I don't know if they're required to. I don't think it's in our contract or it's not in our state law that if we're allocated, for instance, 2,000 positions, but we only have 1,800 actives, that they have to pay in for 2,000. They have not been doing that. However many people, bodies are actually here is the amount of money that they've been contributing. It would be great if they contributed more. If we had 180 vacancies, if they contributed more, I'd probably defer that to the APA, say that might be a contract issue that we can bargain for. I mean, I can ask them on behalf of APRS, but to answer your question, no, they have not been contributing that.
But on the flip side, those are not liabilities that you guys are holding on the books.
Correct, they're not. It would help us in terms of the more money we can get right now is obviously always gonna help. But every person that comes here contributes that amount of money, but on the books, when we talk about an unfunded liability, we're assuming we're gonna have to pay them $70,000, $80,000 for 30 years in retirement. So that's where that liability comes in. All right, well, if there's no other questions, I appreciate y'all's time, and we'll definitely be here keeping everybody posted as we move forward with the various stages of this.